Today, I'm excited to have the man behind some of the most recognizable and iconic marketing campaigns over the past 30 years. From Budweiser Frogs to What's Up, I Love You Man, and The Real Men of Genius, former Chief Creative Officer at Anheuser-Busch, Mr. Bob Lachky. Bob, thanks for being here.
Adam, my pleasure. Looking forward to talking to you.
Thank you. Um, you know, would you mind kind of starting off and kind of telling me a little bit more about your background, how you got started in the marketing and advertising world?
Sure. In college, I went to University of Illinois, and I also went to grad school there. I was pretty focused at that time on a career in advertising. They had a good advertising program. It was kind of unique in the country at the time. I think Michigan State, and there were a couple other schools at that time that had programs like that. And so that's what I pursued. And when I got out, I started right away at an old line big agency on Michigan Avenue in Chicago called Foot, Cone and Belding, and they no longer exist. They've evolved through all the mergers that happened in the 90s. But I started there, and I moved over to the original Needham, Harper and Steers, which slowly but surely became DDB Needham, and et cetera, all these iterations of new agencies. So I learned the business from the agency side. And one of my clients, when I was really in my young career as an account executive, I was not a creative person. I knew I had some skill in that area, but I wasn't as good as a real good writer or an art director would be in the old traditional agency structure. So I always wanted to be an account management person. But my career took a big change when I actively campaigned for a job at Needham, Harper and Steers because they had the McDonald's account. And that's a business that I just really respected. And I always followed campaigns. I don't know, ever since I was a kid, I just was into that. I guess I was a TV person. You know, I watched TV all the time. And so when I got a McDonald's, it was a great experience. To me, that was like big time advertiser, great client. Being based in Chicago, I was born and raised in Chicago. It was great to work at a company that was based there as well. But that was pretty short-lived. It lasted a year, and we lost the business to Leo Burnett. And it was a whole nother story you could write a book about. But that's when I got on to I got to Needham, Harper and Steers, obviously, the previous year. But I really didn't have a place to go. I thought I was going to get let go. And Needham, Harper and Steers, under the tutelage of Keith Reinhard, who was a legend in the advertising business, a creative guy. He actually saved everybody's jobs that worked on the McDonald's business and put us to work on pitching a piece of business from Anheuser-Busch. They already, Needham, Harper and Steers at that time did have a small piece of business called Busch Beer, but they were pitching for the new light beer called Budweiser Light. And I worked on that pitch team. And I was young, you know, I was certainly not instrumental in winning the business, which we did. But when we won the business, my job was saved, and I started working on Anheuser-Busch Bud Light.
From like an account management.
I've done that for a number of years, and then long story short, coming to an end finally, we ended up winning the business, changing some campaigns to finally get it into the mainstream. And about that time, Anheuser-Busch had a fairly major transition in the late 80s in their own ranks. They had a bit of a scandal that occurred where some executives were taking kickbacks from suppliers, and Mr. Bush kind of basically cleaned house and was very reticent to get marketing people from the inside. He wanted people from the outside. Well, I was about as far outside as you could be and still be in. So they hired me to be the Bud Light brand manager, and that's the rest is history. I started there in late 88. And fortunately for me, I worked underneath August Busch IV from the very beginning. He was my boss. Well, we worked alongside actually the first year or two as he was coming into the company. And that was really the greatest lucky break I could have had, is to work alongside him first, get to know him. And then as he progressed, obviously ahead of me, he brought me along with him. So that's how I got there, and that's how I ended up at AB.
Sure. So do you feel like that the fact that you were on the agency side first actually benefited you somewhat, starting to work for the brand?
Absolutely. I mean, that was, to me, the lucky break of all time, because I honestly, my feelings about advertising were just about the creative development process. And although I was an account manager on the account management side, even today I would venture in agencies, you're not really a business manager. You're really a client liaison. And so when I had gone to, when they recruited me, when they wanted me to come to their company, to Anheuser-Busch, I was very nervous, very reticent to do it because I really didn't have the P&L, traditional MBA training that, all my counterparts would have. But I had enough confidence in myself, and they didn't really care about that. They wanted my advertising skill. That's what Mr. Bush said when he interviewed me. He said, I want you to come here. We need help. They were having a problem with the Budweiser Light rollout. The brand was not getting traction. Miller Lite was kicking their fanny. So we really, I was charged with bringing Bud Light back from an advertising perspective. So I was very lucky that was the skill set they wanted, as nervous as I was about can I handle the business side and the pricing and all the things that go along with truly managing a brand.
Sure. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I know you just kind of somewhat mentioned it. Anheuser-Busch was not the leader it is today back when you originally started. A lot of that growth happened with a lot of the marketing that was done, over the last 20 to 30 years.
Well, actually, yes and no. I mean, yes, in the light category, we were in our infancy because Miller Lite had a 10-year head start on us, and Coors Light was already in the market as well. But as an overall company, yes, AB was still the master, the giant of the industry. But I'll tell you, they were stagnant in circa 1988, 89. Budweiser was starting to get eaten into by the light beers, and of which AB did not have. They had Natural Light, which was kind of a college beer at the time, still is. Natty Light, right? And they ended up, not having enough volume and certainly not heading where the business was heading. So Budweiser was starting to get knocked around. This is like in the late 80s. Mm-hmm. So yes, they were still the largest American brewer. And there was not really any craft business at all in the country at that time. There were imports, the Heinekens of the world and Amstel and all those guys were coming in. But AB's real problem was not having an established light beer. So that was where the problem was at that period of time.
Sure. Now, shifting focus slightly, you kind of mentioned his name earlier, and I don't know if this would be that person, but who would you consider to be your single biggest influencer as a marketer?
Well, it's really August Busch III. Now, August Busch III was the chairman at that time. And the succession, it was like a monarchy, my goodness, for a publicly held company to have that much family influence was kind of remarkable. Many books have been written about it, but August Busch III was really the guy that was instrumental in me coming to Anheuser-Busch. He really didn't know me. I mean, I was just an agency guy, and I was so far down the chain of his awareness when I was working on his business, servicing his company. But when he knew who I was and then my skill set, we became good friends. And as far as you can be a friend with him, let's put it that way. I mean, he's a great guy, but I still see him today. And his son was the next most important influencer. Although he's a little younger, he and I are very good friends. We still are. And we learned a lot together. And the experience I had over him in terms of just being in business, I helped mentor him a little bit. He taught me a lot. So the Bushes, as much as it's been written or said or whatever, the good, the bad, have been absolutely influential in my career, taught me a ton. And if it wasn't for Mr. Busch hiring me, we would have never, I would have never experienced the things I experienced. I dare not say we would have never done this or that. I don't know that, but I do say the man knew what he wanted. He wanted good marketing, and I had a lot of battles with him, and yes, he was tough to deal with, but with August IV's help of running air cover for me for 15 years, we were able to get remarkable work produced and make a great impact for the company.
So that brings me to a good question. I think you kind of just touched on it about, having some of those battles, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that happens, especially oftentimes in marketing, one of the difficulties is getting buy-in from superiors on a particular campaign, whatever that marketing campaign is.
Well, that's a great question, and it was really a day and night story. The night is, I'll give you first, is when I first came in, the advertising process was largely still being approved all the way up to the top level of the company. So in other words, you'd be bringing a 12 or 24 frame storyboard from the agency, or the agency would help present it for you. But a lot of times you'd be carrying the boards up yourself to the boardroom, and you'd be showing it to a bunch of 60-year-old guys.
Right.
Careful making fun of 60-year-old guys as I look at myself. But I mean, this was like, it was like a comedy to be presenting ideas that were intended for a 25-year-old target audience to guys that are all sitting in country clubs and, aren't even drinking beer anymore. And you're
Right.
thinking, oh my God, how are we going to get anything approved?
Sure.
That was the night. But when August the 4th came in, it helped immensely, because his father obviously is going to give his son some leeway. And as he was getting coached by me on what we need to do, and himself, he had great instincts. We were able to really break the pattern of not having to go upstairs to show ideas. And some of the greatest, the great first ideas we did together, August the 4th and myself, were for Bud Light, right when we were struggling. We were trying to find our identity again, because we had Give Me a Light, no Bud Light. And it's a campaign you may or may not remember, but it was the positioning of Bud Light that finally got a toehold against Miller Lite. But that ran out of gas, and we were struggling. And we knew we had to get back to comedy. So when we started doing some work together, August the 4th and I, because he was my boss as head of Bud Family, and I was still the Bud Light brand manager, we started doing stuff without anybody's approval. And some of it was pretty risky. And his dad would forgive us, but he beat us over the head for not having approved stuff. And we even had problems with the agency, because we had a renegade creative team at DDB Needham by that time. I think they were DDB, who was giving us ideas off the beaten path, and we were going and producing them on the heels of an approved shoot. So August and I'd be out in LA and say, hey, we got this new director and we got this idea. And he goes, go get it. I'm going, man, we're going to get shot if we get it. And so so we're in LA for 2 more days. We're shooting commercials without anybody's authority. And even the agency doesn't know about it, except my little creative team. But that kind of approach is exactly what we needed. We needed to go and do ideas and get out there. And some of the greatest early work we did was done that way. And granted, we eventually got ourselves into a little bit more of a, I wouldn't say professional, but where we kept our management in line and said, look, I mean, here's what we're out trying to get. But we followed this formula of going to get it if our gut was right on a lot of things, like the Yes I Am campaign, the What's Up. I mean, we kind of kept going with that approach, because look, we don't need any more interference. The last thing you need in a big company is a committee. And you even saw it in the big agencies. They'd have a committee before the ideas would spit out of the agency. And I mean, you can't believe how much stuff would get killed or modified, or lines that were just right would get changed because some old guy's sticking his nose in the business. And it's like, come on, man, you gotta cut through it if you want to have stuff that's edgy and entertaining and cutting through. And so, great question. There was a day and a night first, and then daylight hit when we realized we've got to do this on our own. We don't need any more interference internally.
Yeah, and you got to make sure that you're communicating, like you said. If that audience that you're bringing those ideas to is not your core demographic audience, then obviously there's a disconnect there, right? So
yeah, and you could see, Adam, when I was watching the Super Bowl this last week, I mean, I honest to goodness, I would love to just predict that most of the stuff I saw, most of the work I saw, was somebody with a particular point of view jamming it down somebody else's throat. So whether it was the choice of a certain celebrity, I always want to work with Steven Tyler from Aerosmith. It's like, what, for Kia? What are you doing? Danny DeVito, he's great. I loved him on Taxi. Like, what? Who's Danny DeVito? I mean, really, I know who he is. I know who Steven Tyler is. But when you try to marry stuff like that up, or I really think we need a politically correct message for this and that. Yeah, but you're T-Mobile. What are you doing? This has nothing to do with advancing your. And so you see the landscape littered with these bizarre unbelievably twisted messages with no strategy.
Right.
Biggest stage of you could possibly have as an advertiser, and all you're doing is wasting money and leaving people scratching their head or angering people.
Right.
So I see that as an offshoot of not clarity as to what you're trying to do, and are you really on a strategy? And
Right.
sometimes people get in this playroom called doing the creative, and man, they got to touch it, and that's the danger.
Yeah. Well, so in terms of strategy, what did your ideation process look like? How did you know when you had like a winning idea?
Well, that's a great question. We were in such desperate straits in the late 80s. When I got in there, I was actually hired to get rid of Spuds McKenzie too. They said, because Spuds McKenzie was an idea that Bud Light had it's a long story on the evolution of where it came from, but it was a really genius idea. And it ran out of gas pretty quickly, about a year, once the government stepped in and said, hey, you were trying to appeal to children. And that was never the idea, but the fact that the brewery started producing like stuffed dolls of
Right.
Mackenzie, not a good idea. I mean, that does look like you're advertising to children, but not even on anybody's radar screen. So when I got in there, I knew that Spuds McKenzie was dead as well. And I had been at the agency prior to that producing Spuds McKenzie commercials, and it was a high ride for us. It was like, wow, People Magazine is following us on shoots with Spuds, and it's such a novelty, but we got chopped off at the knees pretty quick. So you start to realize that you got to have a plan, right? And our problem on Bud Light was very simple. We've got to get back to a personality that's different than Budweiser. We can no longer be seen as just a flanker with a one-off idea like the dog. I mean, what is our idea? And the idea was really nurtured out of Spuds and about the run from the original Give Me a Light campaign. It's like, look, we have to have a preference strategy. We have to have a strategy about people want a Bud Light for no reason other than that's the best one there is. And this was the backdrop of Miller Lite being the dominant presence in the market. We had to tell people that they had a choice, because you could go into bars across America at that time and you'd ask for a light, and they owned the bar call and it was on their label. So any bartender in his right mind, oh, you mean Miller Lite? So we had to get people asking for Bud Light and then make it distinctive from Miller Lite. Now, they had a brilliant campaign at the time which featured ex-retired athletes and pseudo-celebrities. It was brilliant. And they walked away from it. And I don't know why they did. They probably just got tired of it. But that's when our opportunity to get back and return to humor opened up. So it not only was a strategy of people going to great lengths, a preference strategy, but it was an executional strategy as well that had to be adhered to. And it was whatever you do, you're going for Bud Light, and it's got to be surprising and fun and hilarious. You got to create a Bud Light world that nobody else can create. And it's got to be so preposterous yet semi-believable, because you're always winking at the customer with this. Right. And that was the well thought out strategy. And it was only validated by doing some work, testing it, seeing what took. And we realized there were certain mistakes we were making at times where it was really too stupid or it was too sophomoric. And you'd always run that line. One person's humor is, some people like the Three Stooges, some think they're repulsive, right? I mean, it's comedy is very hard, and it can't be foul. You just want it to be funny, mainstream. So that's the battle. That was the Odyssey. But for honestly 15 years, that's what I protected with my heart. I mean, every new brand manager I had always wanted to come in and play around with it. And it's like, no, you're a shepherd. You just keep shepherding the sheep along. Right. Nobody needs to change the main deal here. And that's the battle you have. And now Bud, on the other hand, the thing we had to do is we had a lot of your dad's beer type of things going on. And that's why we had to take the Clydesdales off the hitch and start giving them more human personalities. And then, although the Clydesdales was not your own campaign, the only thing you did for Budweiser, it was a corporate campaign as well. But that was a critical eye-opener for us, that we could play with the hitch. We could take the horses off. They could develop personalities. And today I'm proud to say that, that's kind of at least something that's continued on. The shocking thing to me is how the current owners of the company don't even put the Clydesdales in the Super Bowl anymore. Right. Blows me away. Right. Because to me, the Clydesdales was always the umbrella for the entire company. It helped sell Budweiser. It helped sell Bud Light. It helped the wholesalers or, the local distributors. It was America. And it's like, blows me away that these guys lost that thing, but that's their deal, not mine. Right.
Sure.
But, so that's kind of it. I mean, it's not 12 pieces of paper. I saw creative briefs, man, from people. We'd get a brand manager from some other company, packaged goods train, and they'd be in there pontificating with a binder, and they'd give a creative team a binder. And it's like, give me that thing, throw that away. Because if this thing isn't stated in a page, you're not going to get any ideas. You're never going to get the what's up, or you're never going to get real men of genius if you think that way.
Right.
And the key here is you get an idea and it's not change it every year. That's what drives me nuts, is I see campaigns that are brilliant and they suddenly change. And I know exactly why it changed, because some new knucklehead got in there and he's changed it, or she's changed it. So I just change for change's sake in marketing is death.
Sure.
And you can evolve it. Most of the time you can evolve it. So.
Well, one of my favorite campaigns of all time is the Real Men of Genius. But I know probably from a general audience standpoint, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it won the Gold Lion Award, was the What's Up story.
Right.
How did that idea come about?
Well, that's a great question. Real Men of Genius. We were starting to hit our stride again, and this is circa late 1999, I guess, or so. We actually had a radio. We were doing well with the television advertising on Bud Light. We felt good, but radio was always a battle for us. It's like, how can you create more of a theater of the mind? And the guys actually came up with a precursor to this that ran for, I don't know, maybe half a year, where Charlton Heston, we had done an I Love You Man commercial with Charlton Heston, of all things. Why, I don't know to this day, but he was funny. And they put him in radio as the voiceover. And it was a very funny idea. It was like a guy, kind of a drone-like voice. Well, I was standing up the line at the theater. And then you'd hear Charlton Heston's voice. He was standing in the line at the theater. And the guy goes, yeah. And then and so you're getting this dialogue between this slacker and Charlton Heston, like pontificating. And somehow Bud Light gets into the story. And it was very funny. And it was kind of we saw it as synergy to the fact that we were running Charlton Heston on TV in a couple of these I Love You Man commercials. So we realized that he was starting to have issues. I don't think he got the campaign, and he was a nice man. We had him to our convention. And he's obviously a legend. With all due respect, he's just the best. And he was wonderful for us and funny. It was good. But we just started thinking, is there something else we can do? And that forced us the guys came up with an idea that was originally termed Real American Heroes. That was the name of the campaign. And it was done exactly in this format. The sung voice from the guy from Foreigner.
Right.
Yeah, that's the band. I can't remember his name. He was the lead singer. He's a great guy. And the voice that you hear very, very often is the main delivery voice. And it was very good counterpoint and just parodying people in life, right? And it worked. Well, the problem was when the campaign had just launched, that's when 9/11 hit. And we knew, oh my goodness, these are not real American heroes. We've got to change this. And we thought we were going to have to change the whole thing. We thought, oh my goodness, this is so disrespectful to use a line in this terrible time in our country. Sure. The guys made a real simple fix that seems like, wow, it must have been there all the time. They just call it Real Men of Genius. And it, grammatically didn't sound right. It was kind of like, what? And we just went with it because we loved the format of the singing and the very deep voiced announcer that we thought, well, let's just go with it. And, the rest is history. I think we did over 450 of these things. And it ran for how many years until, again, the new owners and all their genius just decided the campaign was no good anymore, that it wasn't selling beer. It's like, oh my goodness. So, but it was something that was so good. We ran it forever, and we also adapted it for television, which was kind of an ill-fated venture because I knew when you start showing people, the bald guy or the guy, whatever, nudist colony man. It's like, what? We can't do that because everything is going to go to slow motion. Right. Going fat people jiggling. It's just like, no, we don't need to do that. But I was told you have to do it by my most senior guy, the chairman of the board, because he heard from somebody that'd be good on TV. So you do it on TV, and doesn't make it as funny because the theater of the mind goes away. So we ran a couple of those for, I don't know, a month and realized this isn't funny. It's hurting the radio campaign because you're revealing too much. You're pulling too much of the curtain back. So long-winded, but that's the story of Real Men of Genius.
So you kind of talked a little bit about this as well of like, so obviously it seemed like you all had hit after hit with campaign. So how did you know when it was time to cut that campaign off and sunset it and move on to the next version?
Well, I mean, that's a kind compliment, but it was always with anxiety because I knew this stuff would burn out pretty fast, and it always made you worry that where do we go next? On Bud Light, I wasn't as worried because I knew that the strategy was right, and I knew we were going to be okay as long as we got funny spots. And the way we kind of managed that was we made sure that we were hitting topical things as we went through time. So that any creative team could come in and pretty much pick up and put their signature on it. We created kind of our own celebrities. For example, the guys wanted to come up with an idea with Kings of Comedy, and Kings of Comedy was not a real well-known cable thing that was going on at the beginning, but Cedric the Entertainer was starting to emerge as a key piece of Kings of Comedy. So we ended up getting Cedric to do a spot that launched a 4 or 5 spot pool with Cedric that ran for 2 years. And so that was a great discovery, not a celebrity for celebrity's sake, but a celebrity that could be helped by this, catapult his fame, because he started doing movies after the Bud Light gig. And the fact that he brought so much, but it was always about Bud Light. And so that was another guy we found that could deliver our Bud Light message was Carlos Mencia from Minds of Mencia, a cable thing that was starting to become popular. So those are some examples there, but also doing things like, we had a spot called Robo Bash, when these electronic robot battle game, battle reality TV things were starting to occur. We did our version of it. We did one spot and we moved on. And so, we were always trying to tap into popular culture with Bud Light to say, hey, what's hot now? Let's try that. What's fashionable? What programs are people out there talking about? So on the Bud Light side, to me, it was easier to do. It was much easier to figure out how to stay on the tracks. Now, Bud was a little different. It was difficult because we were starting to hit some home runs with some of the things we discovered just through other means. Like What's Up is a great example. What's Up was great because the guys found it on an independent little film festival. They saw a thing called What's Up. Exactly the way it's produced for Budweiser was exactly the way it was filmed without Bud by the original director, Charles Stone III. And the guys they showed me the tape, I'll never forget this. And they said, well, you got to see this. And it was like, funny. It was cool. And I said, okay, so what do you want to do with it? Well, we want to insert Bud into it. I go, how are you going to do that? And he said, well, just, hey, B, what are you doing? Nothing. Just watching, what's up? And that was the way it was. Instead, just having a Bud and watching TV. And they always had a Bud. And I said, well, yeah, that's cool. So you're going to call this guy that did, oh, no, we're going to rip it off. I go, no, you're not going to rip it off. You can't rip it off. You can't do that. This is this guy's property. And it's not going to be as funny as if this guy didn't do it. And plus, those people are perfect. I mean, why don't we just get those guys to work with us? And so the agency was not really wanting to do that. And so they kind of, they swallowed their pride, went and contacted Charles, and Charles agreed to do it. And as we were going through the process creatively, it was funny how the guys kept trying to put in new people. And we said, no, what are you doing? And so this was one good time, I think I can honestly say myself and August and the brand team blocked these guys from making mistakes just so they could have creative, it's not their idea, it's his idea. And the company will benefit more and more from the good, positive PR, if nothing else, that we let this guy do his idea for Budweiser. I don't care what the creative awards programs say about you ripping something off. This is a great idea.
Right.
And as a result, we were vindicated by that. I mean, the guys even wanted to change, my guys wanted to change the line from true to right on. And I go, right on? I mean, that's like a 1970s Billy D. Williams movie. Are you out of your mind? It's true. Well, we didn't think you knew what it what it meant. And I was give me a break. I know what it means. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it. It means right on, but we're not saying right on. Okay. And then poor Charles, he's sitting in the middle wondering, why am I getting into this with these guys? But he was very grateful to us at the brewery for protecting the idea, because they were kept trying to change it. And then, my guys are just brilliant and did so much great work at DDB. But this is one time I was shocked at how they didn't get it. Right. It was more about we want to get credit for this. Well, no, you take credit with this man. You brought it to life for him. So that was a tough one. I mean, and a different one is frogs, where you see a one-off idea and you just go get it. Now, the thing's not going to run for more than a year or two, but the brilliance of what we did there, I think, was we said, okay, we know we can't keep having frogs say Budweiser. I mean, you got them talking to each other. You have them talking to you're riding an alligator. How many more things can we have Budweiser do? Not much. So we were fortunate by the way we structured our agencies at that time. We had more than one agency, which many, the primary agency didn't like it, but it saved us. Goodby Silverstein was the secondary agency. They came up with an idea, because we asked, is there a way you guys can evolve, frogs? And Goodby's idea was, yeah, let's have other jealous swamp creatures try to get in a Bud commercial. I go, what do you mean jealous swamp creatures? And he goes, well, like weasels or lizards or whatever. And honest to goodness, that's how we came up with Louis the Lizard. And the whole idea of that, their intro to it almost got me fired, was to assassinate the frogs on the Super Bowl, electrocute them in their frog bar. It's just like, I mean, the bizarre, when you still think back to the storyboards, you go, are you kidding me? We can't do assassinations. Oh, it's just a commercial, man. And it's like, okay. I mean, so you're buying into this and you realize I'm going to get killed here. So we went through it. We did it. They unsuccessfully didn't electrocute the frogs on national television on the Super Bowl, but it did launch Louis the Lizard, which was brilliant. And it got us at least 3 more years of Louis the Lizard, TV spots for sure. But the other brilliant thing about Louis the Lizard, it worked on radio, because the voices of Louis and Frank, which was like at the time Sopranos was so big, again, borrowing from the influence of what's going on. We got 2 guys out of Queens who were stage actors but talked like thugs. Hilarious. And on radio, they were even better than TV, because they were like, hey, Frankie, and it was just like, oh my God, this is exactly what we try to do on Bud Light, and now we're doing it on Bud. So if you can evolve an idea and be open-minded enough to say, maybe this thing can leapfrog, I think you just start saying, look, I've got about a year and a half. As soon as I get tired of it, it may be too late, because you got to get out before the customer gets tired of it. And so maybe we jumped early on some things, but I always felt we made good calls on evolving it, because even when What's Up ran out of gas, and it was only a year, and it was more driven by the fact that Charles Stone didn't really want to do this anymore. And that was okay. He's a good guy. And we started producing the What's Up spots ourselves. We decided, well, is there another way to say what's up? And then we started doing parodies of, of what's up. Like, how do gangsters say what's up? They go, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? So we started doing evolutions of what's up, and the consumer followed us. And we got through that we probably extended the idea another couple years because of that. So that's how you do it. I mean, if you have something that's so wickedly popular, and you can slowly get the customer to the next place by an evolution that they understand, then why wouldn't you do it? I mean, a company that's doing it great right now, a couple companies, is the insurance sector. And when you look at Progressive, whether you like Flo or hate her, Farmers Insurance, these guys are evolving. Geico, my God, it's the greatest. Geico's doing what we've done. And I always admired Geico when I was working at the brewery. They've been doing it forever. And they do have the 15 minutes, you give me 15 minutes, I'll give you 15%. I get it. But I'm always entertained, and I get a good feeling out of their marketing. Right. So, I think that's the plan. Evolve, don't blow it up. If you have to blow it up, it's going to be hard to get back on those tracks.
And as obviously, since you date back to even, the mid 80s ish, obviously a lot of digital components and digital campaigns that's where everything's at nowadays, to the most, for the most part. I mean, obviously, TV and radio for sure. But is a good campaign no matter what platform it's on?
Yeah, I think, and I experienced that with What's Up. I mean, when What's Up came out, we originally debuted it on Christmas Day. NBA always has a Christmas Day basketball game. We had a 60, and the 60 seconds of "What's up, what's up, what's up" was like, whoa. I mean, you have to be a real fan to like that much stuff. And I loved it. You know, August the 4th loved it. His dad was like, "Oh, I don't know, man. You guys are running." You know, four African-American guys like all over and it was awesome. They're the coolest looking guys. I mean, guys you want to be buddies with. That's the way we looked at it.
Sure.
But when you're talking to, you know, old wholesalers and Anheuser-Busch all over the country, black and white, going, "What are you guys nuts?" They found it repulsive, and we were in trouble. When we launched that, within a week, we were getting crushed. We had just put a call center phone number on our can packages, and our call center was getting inundated by people who hated the idea. So we very quickly, and thank goodness for Mr. Bush as our leader, the third, he allowed us to just do some quick fixing. I took the 60 off the air right away. We moved it to 30s. We had 30s cut. We had a couple other renditions of it cut where we focused on a single character. And it mollified a little bit of the outrage of just that 60 seconds in your face. And within 2 weeks, because we ran we ran What's Up on the Super Bowl 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, within a couple weeks already, you were getting Katie Couric on Today's Show and Howard Stern, you know, two totally opposite people saying, "Hey, did you see that thing for Budweiser? The guy's going, 'What's up? Isn't that cool?'" And you're like, "Oh my God, this is what we need." And you started getting people now, and this was the beginning of video content sharing, to your original question. We were getting parodies within 2.5 weeks of What's Up. And we tracked one to Iceland. We got one out of Israel. We had this worldwide thing where we had rabbis doing it. We had ladies planting tulips in a garden doing it, and they were like mocking and aping the idea and sending it. I mean, we were getting these videos. And we were like, "Oh my God, this thing is taking on." And all the negative criticism from our own system, we got thrown out of a few accounts across the country. But the wholesalers backed us because they started to realize this is a very cool young idea. And it's doesn't matter what race you are. This is about friends. And so we stuck to our guns, but video content and the sharing of it on the internet, this was year 2000, I believe. That's when it was like really hitting a zenith. People were ripping the thing, and it was awesome. And that saved us for sure. And this is in the space of a month.
Right. That's crazy. So what are you up to nowadays?
Well, I've been consulting a little bit in talking to smaller, more privately held companies. It makes it a little easier. I mean, I do a lot of speaking engagements and things that people like to hear about what we used to do. You're starting to feel a little old doing that, but you know, I think there's some really tried and true strategies that we followed and other great companies have followed. And you see many doing it now, like in the insurance category, following, being true to their brands, not getting, mesmerized by just hiring a celebrity or doing whatever you think is cool or following too much of a current production technique. For us in our era, I'd say early 90s, it was we called it the cinema verite, where the camera's moving around trying to find it's like, give me a break. Let's focus on a certain style that benefits us, and let's not chase technique. Let's chase our strategy. So that's kind of what I advise and when I go. But I got to be honest, a lot of people call and say, "Wow, you help us because of Budweiser." And it's like, look, you don't need, but you need a good, you need a good digital strategy. You need a good online thing. And I have a group of guys that I work with. Well, we do, more rebuilding websites, making sure that they have suitable video content, and basically front end. That they have a strategy. I guess they think that since I just did funny commercials, I never thought about it. We just did it. So, but it's always about doing a SWOT analysis to me at the front. You
Right.
absolutely have to know, what are you trying to do? What are your, strengths, weaknesses, and your opportunities? What are your threats? You've got to understand that. I can't believe how many smaller mid-sized companies that I've worked with who really are kind of making money and don't know how or why or how they can sustain it.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is the shocking thing. But believe me, nothing that's too taxing, because I had enough. I had enough of that in one lifetime. But so that's about where I'm at these days.
Well, that's great to hear. Bob, I've really enjoyed speaking with you today. Been very enlightening, and your stories are awesome. So thank you again for your time. And like I said, thanks. It's just been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed it, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care.